All right, so hello everyone. Community engagement here at the Royal BC Museum, Phase 1, just the beginning. And wanted to start by saying that the museum, the Royal BC Museum and the BC Archives is located on the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. When we do anything at the museum, any action that's taken within the museum, considered within the museum, it's grounded in the rich, deep history, centuries um, of the people that have lived and continue to live on this land. So and especially as we're going out into different communities around the province, it has been really important just to reflect back on these local lands that I feel very grateful to live and work within. But I know that everyone is joining from lots of different places around the province. I really welcome you to reflect on where you live and what territory you live on and what actions we are all taking to honor that and honor that relationship. So we have, so I wanted to give a little bit of an overview of how we came to the community engagement work that's been happening over the last 4 or 5 months, and a little bit of the backstory of how we've arrived to where we are now. There's some of this we have talked about during our formal sessions, so I wanted to make sure that that was present here as well. So the Royal BC Museum, it's actually started in 1886, but the buildings that currently have the galleries and a majority of the collections is in the Inner Harbor of Victoria, the Lekwungen territory. And see that image there. The building complex opens, the start of it opens in 1968. But it took a few years until the early 70s until all of the core galleries, so Natural History, First Peoples Gallery, and the Becoming BC galleries were completed. At that time, there were, as many buildings at that time, there were lots of building materials that were used that we wouldn't necessarily use today, but they're still present within the museum, like asbestos and other things that are now a challenge within the space. The 1980s and onward, at different waves of recognition that this building has an aging infrastructure is identified. There's some remediation that has happened, but the issues have just continued on in terms of like a building that is really challenging ability to repair and fix as it is aging. And then in 2018, there are formal seismic reports showing long-term risks and the need for extensive infrastructure upgrades. Both in what you're seeing in this image to the right is the Fannin Tower, where majority of the collections are housed. In front is the BC Archives building, and then right behind on the left is the gallery exhibits building. 2019, there was the speech from the throne recognized and pledged the act to modernize the Royal BC Museum in recognition of everything I was just saying. And then also in February 2020, an announcement to build a new purpose-built collections and research building in Colwood, and that work is undergoing and in process and ready to be built. It's designed and ready to be built. June 21st, 2021, a report to British Columbians about the investigation of the internal workings within the museum and some of the fundamental challenges within the museum in terms of workplace culture. And so what was determined from that report is that the organization has inadequately showcased the whole story of the peoples of BC, and that it was vitally important that equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility goals be integrated in everything that the museum does going forward, in addition to being guided by UNDRIP and DRIPA. So January 2022, the third floor closes in preparation for some of the larger work that would be happening within the museum, which was announced on May 2022, which was the plans for the museum downtown site being reimagined completely from the ground up. Part of that announcement said some of the parameters of that, which was 800 million and 8 years of this really important work, but really extensive work that needed to happen. There was some concern, lots of concern in different ways to that plan. So then the redevelopment plans for the museum downtown site stopped in June of 2022. And that's where we're at now. So the community engagement work begins. And so we've been, as a department, been formally a department here at the museum since January this year. And we've been doing work for the last 5 months, starting this process. Not to say that there's not in community engagement that has happened over the years. There is lots of community engagement that happens across many different departments, many different museum staff, working with and alongside community really deeply. But this is the first time with an organized department and a concerted effort for bringing community engagement into all that we do here at the museum. So it's set up to be 2 phases to begin with. The first phase is January to this summer. We're kind of in a transition period right now, and that's why we're doing this report out. Phase 1 is the focus on dialogue and information sessions, which is informing the public about the current state of the museum, including challenges and opportunities, and then building relationships, being open to addressing questions the public has, learn how best to engage with communities. And then phase 2, was we enter into that in September and beyond, is deeper engagement through co-creation. So some of the ideas that have surfaced during this phase 1 work will then be addressed further in phase 2, and then creating and activating participatory public engagement through co-creation going forward as well. Who we are as a team, just to say we're a growing team. So the VP of engagement and DRIPA implementation here at the Royal BC Museum is Janet Hanus. We also are the community engagement manager is Jen Vanderzee. The communication coordinator is Joy Charlson. Tom Child, Jaco Lepton here at the museum have been doing incredible work, bringing forward many of the sessions that we've done. Jaco Lepton is the Director of Cultural Transformation and DRIPA implementation. So his department and our department has been working really closely together in the work going forward. Veronica Buck, Wendy Lorch, and Jeanette Angel, who you met in the beginning of this session, are the regional partnership managers, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward. And I'm the acting director of community engagement and regional partnerships. So phase 1 work near. So I wanted to separate out the idea of the work, this community engagement work that's happened near to us. And many of you perhaps were part of some of those early sessions in January and February here in Victoria. Here's an image of one of the sessions with CEO Alicia Dubois leading that session. She's been at all of the sessions so far, most of the sessions that we've done around the province. And at these sessions at the museum, we, in addition to Alicia bringing forward her her vision as a CEO, as a leader of the museum. We've also invited in museum staff, especially collection managers and learning staff, to bring alive what's happening within the museum, to bring everyone along on the really important work that happens within the museum. And we tried to capture what those conversations were as best we could along the way, sometimes with graphic facilitation, sometimes with post-it notes. And through that, through January to May of 2023, locally, we hosted a provincial First Nations gathering where we had 29 Indigenous leaders from across the province join us for 3 days here at the museum, representing 21 different nations across the province. We had 5 general public sessions. We had 1 session with GLAM, with galleries, libraries, archives, and museums colleagues, a session specifically for the GLAM sector. We had 2 for the business community here in Victoria, Greater Victoria, and then 1 for BC educators and 1 for post-secondary students and educators. Here's some images from the First Nations gathering, provincial gathering that we have, which included discussion, dialogue, also going into the collections, looking at belongings from the nations of the participants, and in order to ground those discussions in what the work is, which includes both the collections, the belongings, and also discussions about repatriation and partnership and working together. There's everyone from that session. Phase 1 work and far, so near and far. So in addition to, and in the First Nations gathering, the Indigenous leaders from around the province came to the museum, and then also we went out to the province in different areas. So these are the locations that we went in the last 4 months. This is not obviously all of British Columbia. As we go in and further deepen into this work, we'll go into other communities, work alongside other communities. These are some of the ones that we initially had public sessions. These public sessions were supported by the great work of partners, both at Modus and Tartan Bond, from a facilitation and a communications perspective. So in addition to our great staff here at the museum, we've been working with Modus and Tartan Bond through this process as well. Here's some images from Kelowna and Nanaimo and Port Hardy. Some of the participants, both adult and youth, very young as well. Really, really good conversations that came out, and each location, each area, very different in terms of the conversations that unfolded in those locations. While we went out, we also brought staff, particularly this round, brought curatorial staff along with us, and then sometimes did sessions, added sessions in the community. So this is Henry Chung, who's the curator of invertebrate zoology on the left. He did a session in Nanaimo High School, along with other staff. And this is India Young on the right, who's the curator of art and images here at the museum. And she and Joel Gibson, the curator of invertebrate zoology, entomology, did a public presentation in Kelowna. So we wanted to, both in sessions at the museum and in community, be able to surface and pull back the curtain on the really good work that's happening in terms of research, collections, and beyond within the museum. We also met with staff at other institutions. To the left is the Umista Cultural Center in Alert Bay. In the middle is the Kamloops Museum, and in the right is the Kelowna Museums. Those are just a few of the spaces that we went into and talked deeply with staff there, and really trying to learn about the incredible work that's happening all around the province. We as staff were really inspired by the work that's happening in both museums, cultural sectors, and the cultural sector and other areas within communities around BC. So that far, the far, not near, but far overviews, that was from February to May. And there were 12 general public sessions in different communities. We also joined a session of the First Nations Leadership Council. We attended Gathering Our Voices, which is a conference for Indigenous youth. And we attended the Métis Nation of BC General Assembly. And we also had 3 general public virtual sessions as well along the way. Trying to show up in authentically and in as many ways as we can in and with different communities. So in-person and virtual dialogue sessions, we had 30 in total. Number of people we've connected with through those sessions, 678. And it's not just a number, these are people that we had deep, rich connection and conversations with in each community and here in Victoria. And then additionally, we had a province-wide survey that was sent out, and there were just about 500 people that filled out that survey. And that survey was really directed at how do we do engagement going forward, trying not to make any assumptions of what people want and how people want to connect. So it was really good information in terms of methods of communication, how to create sessions that would entice people to join in and want to join in on the process. So some of the findings, takeaways, the importance of ensuring that the Royal BC Museum has strong and supportive relationships with other cultural organizations and groups across the province, making sure that the exhibits are diverse and inclusive and that exhibits be guided by the communities the exhibit is about. These are all things that were specifically brought forward at the sessions. And then the tension between a love for the existing galleries and nostalgia, connection, this like deep connection with an experience of the museum as it has been, and then also wanting to see things change and recognizing that it's important for things to change as well. We also, some takeaways, accessibility came up a lot. Financial access, specifically for local folks, just in terms of how can we enter into the museum in a way that's that financial barriers are not present. So physical access, especially for communities that are further away from Victoria, that it's sometimes not feasible to make a trip to Victoria. And then also emotional access. How are our visitors seeing themselves reflected, feeling welcomed into the spaces that the museum holds? And that's an articulated desire and need for many different communities that we talked with. Learning and exhibits, diversity and inclusion, co-creation, digital and outreach opportunities. So there's a real desire for making connections, having the museum being relevant in communities that are away from Victoria. That could be through digital initiatives, that could be through continuing our traveling exhibitions programs, and then all of this be grounded in diversity and inclusion and co-created with community. Reconciliation and DRIPA implementation also came up everywhere we went, just that real desire both from Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, speaking to the importance of representation and storytelling, consent, that consent be the foundation of all work that happens within the museum, continuing the important work of repatriation, and then building meaningful partnerships. And then building an infrastructure. So the tension between the old and the new, as I spoke to the last slide, recognition of the challenges. As soon as we spoke out some of the challenges of the museum and of the building, people in the rooms really felt like they really got that and understood that. It's not that we want a new building for the sake of wanting a new building. It's that the building that currently we're in has a lot of really deep challenges. And then a hub and a satellite approach. There's a lot of advocacy for how the museum could be relevant in different parts of the province and supporting the good work that's happening there. So I wanted to go on to our regional partnership program managers, and I want them to speak a little bit to the work that they're doing. So part of community engagement, and this has been built over the last couple of months, is that there would be staff members within community, not just Royal BC Museum staff in Victoria, but staff members actually in the communities that they live and work. So we hired 3 right now and looking for a fourth up north as well. So Veronica, Wendy, and Jeanette will speak some to the work that they've done so far. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. And Jenny, I don't know if you saw any questions, just because I was sharing the screen. If you saw any questions that you'd like to have come forward right now. Otherwise, we'll go into the regional partnership manager report.
No, there wasn't
Okay.
any specific questions.
Okay, great. So Veronica, Wendy, and Jeanette will report out on what they're doing. I'm going to go, while they're doing that, I'm going to go up to the 3rd floor. So when we're finished this portion of it, and then I'll give a little bit of a overview of what's happening on the 3rd floor. Okay, so over to you, Veronica.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate that. I believe there was a question that just came up, but maybe we can get back to that after your tour. Hello, everyone. I'm Veronica Buck. I'm here on the Snuneymuxw territories in Nanaimo. I'm an educator and a community development professional. I've found that my engagement processes have been incredibly enlightening. It's listening to the myriad of voices from many different communities and individuals in and around Nanaimo and North Island has given me a better idea of how the museum is going to move forward in connecting with the rest of the province. So what did I hear? I heard many things. Most things were about positive collaboration, and that people can't wait for this new idea of engagement to happen with the museum. So I'm also leading the Intercultural Alliance Advisory, and there are many questions coming from that advisory, and a lot of thoughts around how the museum can engage in a much better way, in a more fluid way with these communities. So, we've had thoughts, we've had voices, asking for a deeper cultural dive that they want to hear. People want to hear what the museum is, how they're going to incorporate the various voices that haven't been heard before. The museum is working very hard on developing a safe space and place for people to engage in better. And like one of the comments there is, we need to move at the speed of relational trust. That one really hit me. That to move on and to engage well, we have to develop a place of trust and a safer place for people to engage. A lot of people want to know what's going to happen, and as we go on with the slides and the rest of the presentation, you'll hear where the museum is going later on in the phase 2 and 3. But no one wants a performative actions when they're being asked for their opinions and their viewpoints. And that when I'm engaging with communities, that's what I assure them, that their voices are going to be heard. and that I'm going to bring their thoughts and their ideas forward. And that's just what I'm doing. So I'm loving the process, and I'm a hand talker, and I've been sitting on my hands. So right now, I'm going to pass it over to Wendy Lorch.
Hi everybody, so I'm based in North Vancouver on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh people. I'm grateful to live and work in beautiful lands. So I'm a museum professional who's lived in the Lower Mainland for 18 years. So I've worked, volunteered and studied in various organisations across the Lower Mainland. So when I started this work, I was interested in talking to the people I knew, I'd worked with previously, volunteered with previously, or studied with. So that's how I went about choosing some of the organisations to start with. So you can see on my visuals some of the people I've spoken to so far. So when I looked at the people I was interested in talking to, I wanted to match them to some of important RBCM modernisation themes, such as closure of Old Town, co-creating with community, accessibility, museums with a new building, creating community hubs across BC, and organisations that are experimenting with more diverse programme offerings. So we needed a process. We're having these one-to-one dialogues, and I found out very early in the process that people wanted questions. They didn't just want a conversation, they wanted some set questions that kind of structure our conversation. So I created 10 key questions and then adapted them slightly for each of the audiences that I was speaking to. I chose different organizations or people for the theme that I wanted to speak about. So we had our conversations and started with their experiences of Royal BC Museum. Have they been to the museum before? What do they think about it? What were their impressions? For example, some person I spoke to had been there as a child, then came back as a student of museum program, and then later came when they had children. So their impressions and experiences changed based on whether they were a child, whether they were a parent, whether they were a professional. Then we got into how is Royal BC Museum relevant to their audiences and communities, so people outside of Victoria. Then I found out about their organisation and what are they doing to modernise. And then we got into specifics related to the process of modernisation. And then we talked about co-creating with community. So it's really important to talk to these organisations and find out about their experiences of what we're going through right now. From these conversations, some emerging themes that Chris talked about already. How do we create a museum that is welcoming to all? How do we reach people who don't see museums as a place to visit? And how do we provide for communities outside of Victoria? People or communities who are never going to go to the physical space, how can we provide so that we are genuinely a museum for all? So the overarching theme was accessibility for all. So some examples I heard in the conversations were that if the building is physically accessible to all, then everybody should be able to come through the front door or the main door, shouldn't have to go around the side door, for example, if there's somebody who uses a chair. Or if you come to a place with your child and your child is physically upset, are staff trained to help assist with that? Or are they seeing it as that we need to do something about it? Also thinking about accessibility are our advisory groups. So Veronica mentioned that she was leading the intercultural. I'm looking at youth. So youth research tells us youth is a group that we tend to lose in museums and other organizations. So when we're thinking about youth, we're thinking about 12 to 26-year-olds. In our advisory groups, we have people from our 4 regions. So Victoria, Nanaimo, Kelowna, and the Lower Mainland. We recognise we'd love to have everybody from all over, but at the moment, that's the 4 areas that we are based. So we've just got started with our advisory groups. We've just all had 1 meeting so far. So looking to next steps. So far I've had 12 dialogues in 5 cities. And if you know the Lower Mainland, you know there's at least 22 cities. So I'm really just beginning my work. So there's plenty more people to talk to. We need to take a deeper dive into the themes. We need to continue the relationships with people that we've reached out to, and we will be working on our advisories through May and August. So that's my what I've been doing the last couple of months, and over to Jeanette to tell you about her work.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Jeanette Angel, and I live and work on the unceded and ancestral lands and waters of the Seal people. And I come most recently from an academic background in multidisciplinary arts and science research and exhibition design. So since I've joined the community engagement efforts with RBCM, I've had the pleasure of calling on my friends, meeting new people and attending events in my home region of the Okanagan Valley. Most of my interactions have been in person and located in the places where people gather. It's perhaps for this reason that the conversations have been profound and insightful. So with my heart in community and my feet on the ground, in April and May, I've attended 11 dialogue sessions with people, participated in 12 local community events, and mapped out a growing network of future contacts in the Okanagan. And I've also facilitated an online accessibility advisory with 5 community members from different regions across the province. So what I've learned so far from people in different organizations and communities is that they're aware of a need for change and are already intentionally engaging in wider circles. And they want to connect people and communities within the Okanagan and beyond. My future plans include assisting in an Okanagan Natural Science Symposium with RBM research staff and helping to initiate an Okanagan Curators Network that could potentially meet with curators and collection managers from RBCM and other organizations around the province. The dialogue sessions in the Okanagan have involved listening to what people are doing in organizations, discussing opportunities to collaborate with RBCM in order to amplify the good work that's already being done here, and intentionally meeting with Indigenous and Métis people in their own places of work at their events with the TRC calls to action and DRIPA implementation in mind. I've met with people from heritage museums, art galleries, community art spaces, and community services. I've heard from educators, advocates, residents, environmentalists, scientists, curators, docents, and executive directors. I've attended events including the Salmon Fries release ceremony, the Indigenous Resilience Festival, a Valley Voices poetry book launch, and I visited spaces such as the Métis Community Services in Kelowna and the Sikh Gurdwara in Vernon. Some conversations with people about engaging with RBCM are very preliminary and will require time to establish common interests and practices. And other conversations seem to move really quickly. So what are people saying about being involved in this community engagement? They're saying that they're less focused on RBCM buildings and permanent exhibition spaces in Victoria. It's far away, it's cost prohibitive, and it's colonial. So what they want to work on is developing trust, good communication, and real relationships. And they're very interested and curious about the RBCM collections, what they are and how they can be shared around the province. And finally, they are saying that they're open to collaborate and co-create events and exhibitions with RBCM, especially if they feature the Okanagan or take place here. This is an exciting time to be involved in reimagining cultural spaces, meeting places, and relationships. And I'm happy to be serving the whole province. Thank you. Now I think we're going to go find Chris up in the Old Town space. So off we go.
I am up here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Jenny, can you share that the PowerPoint, just there's one more slide I want to be able to share out. Just let me know, Jenny, if you're able to do that.
Sorry, 1 second.
Yeah, sorry, just at the very end. Because thank you so much, Veronica and Wendy and Jeanette, for sharing out your such good work that you've been doing within your community. It really the core of the work that we're doing here at the museum is shifting from the idea of museum as authority to museum as facilitator, and to work with and alongside communities to have communities tell their stories on their terms. And that works by working closely with community in a way that, like Jeanette said, about building trust. So the next steps, just go to the next slide, Jenny, is some of the key questions to explore going forward into our next work. These are things that have surfaced out of the discussions that we've had so far. Is how do we create a museum that's accessible to all BC residents? How to help the public understand that the RBCM is more than just the galleries, exhibits, and IMAX? How might a modern museum better facilitate a space for all voices to be heard and all stories to be told? How do we bring the museum to areas of the province that are far from Victoria? And how do we honor the past while moving forward? So those are some of the questions, but not only the questions that we'll lean into in the work ahead. So we can stop sharing the screen. Thank you, Jenny, for that. And part of our discussions, both especially in the Victoria dialogue sessions we had, there's a lot of discussion about the third floor, and a lot of discussion particularly about Old Town. And it was through some of those discussions that we had with people in the room, talking through some of the real challenges of creating a space that's welcoming and inclusive, but also honoring what's there and what people love, is we started to sort of think about how we could start that process of reopening the space, but with a new approach. And during our discussions in Victoria, especially the Victoria sessions, we had talked about doing a tour of the third floor, and specifically Old Town, just to give everyone a little window on what's happening up here. So that's what I'm going to do now. And but feel free to ask questions. And Jenny, just because I might not be able to see, if you don't mind, just
Yeah, there's actually a couple
share.
of questions
Great.
that have come in already. One of them is from Kelly that says repatriation is important, but is there a way artifact can still be available so everyone can still learn, view, and observe important cultural aspects of nations here?
Yeah, so that, I mean, those are all really good questions. We were at Umista last week. We were up at the Niska Museum. There are incredible museums and cultural centers that are doing incredible work all around the province. So part of our role we see here at the museum is to encourage people to go to places to see the work and to see that in those areas. And then also, and I see Kelly just says the idea around replicas, and that is some discussions that have come out of the sessions that we've done alongside Indigenous communities, is that the most important thing is that belongings come home in a way that is respectful to the community. But maybe there's a way in which replicas could be made, and the replica stays at the museum, and the belongings, the ancestors come home. But every community is different, and those conversations need to be led by community, and it's a process. It takes time, but it's not the museum's role to decide how that plays out. So all really good questions, and all part of this process. Yeah, we actually talked about that kind of world tour map, and even because we're talking about Old Town, and we were meeting with the leaders of the Victoria Chinatown here in Victoria, brought together by our incredible curator of history here, Dr. Tsui Chung. Prior to our announcement of the Old Town opening back up, just talking with them about Chinatown in Old Town, that many of the people around the table were part of the development of that exhibit. It is an example of a co-created space, but they also see that there's lots of changes that could happen there as well. And one of the things is to explicitly encourage people to go to Victoria's Chinatown, which is only a 10-minute walk away from the museum. So how this museum can be amplify the good work and provide avenues for people to go and explore beyond this museum is part of the work that we're considering and doing. So a world map sounds great.
There's another
Yeah.
question, but I want to make sure we have enough time for you to go to Old Town.
Yeah, totally.
But one is from Ken, is how many meetings have been recorded and available for viewing? Would these include meetings with Indigenous groups?
Yeah, so we have one, and Jenny, you have the link for that, so you could share on the chat and the comment section that we have one recording of a dialogue session that we did. So we would definitely welcome you to look at that and watch that. It's really important, the safety, creating that discussions in a safe, culturally safe way that really honors the conversations that are happening in the room. So we did not record any of the sessions that we did alongside and with Indigenous community members, but we will have a public report that will come out in a couple of weeks, and we'll share that on our website. And some of the findings, with consent, some of the findings will be within that report. So, good question though. So we're up on the 3rd floor, and more. I'm happy to answer questions as we go along, but I just wanted to see for you to see where we're at with the 3rd floor. So this is the foyer area, and you'll see there are big boxes, and these big boxes actually have objects and specimens from this exhibition that's coming into the space, which is Sue the T-Rex from the Field Museum. So this space, which was the Our Living Languages exhibition, that exhibition is now a traveling exhibition. There are multiple copies of that exhibition that are traveling and being seen in communities all around British Columbia. It's really an amazing exhibition, and we're so happy that it's being seen within communities all around the province. This space will be a temporary exhibition space, and it will change over like every 5 or 6 months. And you'll see that here's the big T-Rex feet. So you're the first to see these, because these just came in. So this space here will be the T-Rex exhibition, and then also into this space. So these two spaces, this space, which was the Century Hall space, will also be that temporary exhibition space, which allows for exhibitions both coming in from outside, but also exhibitions created by museum staff and by community members as well. These spaces we'll be able to have more exhibitions because of that. And everything that was in here, the Century Hall, those displays, all those objects are still within our collection. Nothing went away. It's still safely housed within our collection. This space allows for a temporary exhibition area. And when we open, so we are going to open up Old Town again July 29th, but with a new approach. And one of the things that said how we're approaching this is that, or when we had conversations with visitors, one of the things that people didn't realize so much, but as soon as I said it, they were like, oh yeah, that's right, is that there's not much text in Old Town. It was not designed originally to be much interpretive text. So you're not sure exactly what you're seeing. It's more like a set piece than really sort of deep into the sort of historical connections within the displays. So one of the ways that we're approaching it is to start to add layers of interpretive text, both by museum staff, but also, and especially more so in the coming years, by community voices as well. But that takes time. That's working with and alongside community on their terms, not us dictating what they want to bring into that space. So while we're in here, and I see questions coming, but I can't read them. So Jenny, feel free to interrupt me at any time. But when actually, let me go back, because this is actually the most important piece to this, is these display cases right here. Our curator of Indigenous collections, Kevin Brownlee, and our director of cultural transformation and DRIPA implementation, Bradley Dick or Yakwalepton, they are leading on this display, and it's about this territory, about the Lekwungen territory, and working alongside the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, so that as soon as you come into the space, that you know that this space that you're walking on is Lekwungen territory. But this also will take time. When we open on July 29th, it will be, there will be something here that they've created, but it won't, it'll be an iterative process. So we'll add in, one community is ready and wants to add in, we will add in and continue to have this being a living space. And then we'll talk about some of the changes that and the different approach that we're doing within the galleries in this space. And actually I'm not going to show you all these pieces of paper up on the wall. That's the draft text. And with some draft images, we had all of our staff come through last week and give some suggestions and feedback on some of the draft text that we're creating. I also had an engagement session with educators on Saturday, 35 educators from around the province. And they came in and gave their feedback on some of the draft text and some of the approach. So we really see this space as iterative. We'll make some changes and we'll make some additions. And we also see that that's going to be an ongoing process. And especially once we hear from community and that they let us know what they want to see. Some of the spaces are empty, and you see the space in work by cleaning it out. So there's a few spaces are empty, and this space right here, the drapery shop or the draper shop, actually you could never go in before, but
I'm just taking all the curtains down so we can practice that.
Oh yeah. So part of the process is cleaning. So we're cleaning some of the curtains and cleaning the spaces in here. So this space here will be a community exhibit space. And we're going to leave it empty for now because we don't want to rush. We don't want the timeline for community created exhibitions to be on some arbitrary timeline. We want to honor the work that happens with and alongside community. So some of the spaces will stay empty until they're full, and that's part of the work. So this space is empty. The Hives and Evans space you'll see here is also empty, and this provides opportunity for us to add in stories to make this more of an inclusive and welcoming space. So it's not getting rid of things. It's not changing, it's not gutting this, it's providing some more layers, both of interpretive panels, but also of co-created exhibitions within these spaces. One of the last thing I'll say is that one of the projects that I have worked with closely is an exhibition that we created with the BC Black History Awareness Society. And Josh Robertson, who is the curator of the exhibition. So he's created text for the train station about the sleeping car porters and the importance of the sleeping car porters for Black Canadians and Black British Columbians. So those panels will be, and that will be the interpretive text within this space, really honoring that history, but also with a QR code that leads to the Hope Meets Action exhibition online, which has more deep and rich stories. The subtitle of that exhibition is Echoes Through the Black Continuum. And that was Black written, Black designed, and created by a really dynamic advisory and consultation group as well. So that's a little bit. I want to give space for some questions. I know this is all all part of the all part of the process, but yeah, Jenny, do you want to?
Yeah, well, there's been a discussion going on in the Zoom chat. A lot of it about belongings and what should be kept. And I wanted to just share Amina's quote, her comment that said, instead of bemoaning the return of ancestral belongings and then quotation artifacts, why not ask community leaders and knowledge keepers to decide how their history should be shared with the public? Maybe it's through the display of these belongings, maybe it's not. Consent and self-determination are critical. And I think that was an important comment to mention.
It's almost like you worked here before, Amina. Because yeah, that's exactly, if it's Amina that I'm thinking. It's that's exactly the approach that are the Indigenous Collections and Repatriation and Cultural Transformation team led by Janet Handus. That's exactly the approach that's being taken here.
There is another comment of.
It was the same, Amina. Yeah.
Yes, I hear, this is from Evelyn. I hear a lot of discussion about Indigenous communities, which is great, but what about other communities such as Chinese, Japanese, South Asian, etc.?
Yeah, so that's also, as I was mentioning the really incredible work that my dear colleague, Dr. Tsui Chung, has worked really closely with Victoria Chinatown organizations and also Chinatown connections across BC. And also I think I saw Sharon's name pop up as one of the comments as well. So it's really deep, important work that's happening through the South Asian Legacy Project. There was a display here around logging that was through that co-created and deep, rich connection work. So that is a model going forward. But again, it's not the museum's role to say how that should unfold. It is through relationship building and letting community decide, or not letting, but providing space for community to decide direction in that way. But yeah, those discussions are core to the work that we're doing. And Veronica had said the Intercultural Alliance Advisory. I'm leading on a sexuality and diversity, sexuality and gender diversity advisory as well. So we have 4 advisories: accessibility, youth, Intercultural Alliance, and gender and sexuality diversity advisories that are starting that process of that work. But this is an ongoing process.
And you were talking about how some of the spaces are gonna not have anything in it to start, but then working with communities later. There's a question about, are communities being funded in some way to assist them and how they would like the exhibit in the areas of Old Town to be represented at all?
Yeah, so when we enter into that co-creation process, that we're not asking communities to put out any money for that work. That would be, we're supporting that work. It's part of the gallery. It wouldn't be an expectation or at all that the communities would, and the opposite of that they should be honored for their labor by being paid for the work that we're doing with them. Yeah,
definitely. There's another question from Trudy is, I have never gone to the museum because my kids didn't want to go because they
Oh,
thought most museums were too boring. So how do you
No.
make plans to make the museum as interesting as local places like the Exploration Place and things like that?
yeah, great question. And it's I used to run the kids and families programs here, so that's like near and dear to my heart. One of the things, and actually I'll go up to the second floor. Sometimes kids love this space, and many kids love this space in that it's so immersive. Old Town, they feel like they're back in time. They could, even my own kid was pretending to like do lots of things in this kind of space. So that's there is ways in which it is very kid friendly, and other ways in which there's not anything that's specifically designed for and by and with kids. And one of the spaces here, this is just an idea, not that we're committed to it, but one of the spaces that is emptied out is the bedroom. And we're thinking that perhaps this is a space where people could come into. Maybe it's designed for and with kids, so that there's hands-on things in here. There's ways that kids can play in an authentic way, and that it has a little bit of that history of a bedroom, but it's a place that you could access and play within. So that's one idea. And again, the more that we do this work and the more that we're chatting and hearing from, especially like that kind of comment that was just made, is that's part of this process, because it's responding to the needs and wants of community voices, for sure.
Thank you. There's been a couple of comments. I'm going to try to categorize them. There's one, we're talking about diversity and making a safe space in Old Town.
Mhm.
So account for harm against racialized groups or Indigenous people, or I know I've been a part of some of the discussions and talking about making sure that people can see themselves in our exhibit
Yeah.
is very important.
Yeah.
So from children to people from the LGBTQ plus community to be able to see themselves in history, to understand that it is a safe place for them to be. And so there has been some questions about how are we going to make sure that how do we account for people who aren't feeling safe in these spaces?
Yeah, and that's the work going forward. I know Jeanette and Veronica and Wendy were talking about their work so far with their advisories. Myself as well, I had the first advisory session with around gender and sexuality diversity, and that was a big thing that came up. They don't see themselves reflected in this space. They want to be, and and they're really excited about how that might be. But that's part of the work. And that's what unfolds out of those conversations and other conversations. And that's that shift from museum as authority to museum as facilitator. I think in past years, not just this museum, but other museums, it would be the museum saying, well, we think it would be good if there was this, because that would represent this, and that would be a safe space. And it's not the museum's role to define what is a safe space and what is true and authentic representation within a space. But we're part of that. We're facilitating, and we're part of that process. But that's the work with community, with and alongside community.
Perfect. And the one last question, because I know we're going a little bit over time, is a little bit about talking the expectations about Old Town opening. I know there's, especially like you were saying, a lot of local people are very enthusiastic and nostalgic for the place. So what is the expectation of, as you've shown, things will change, things are evolving and changing, but also is there an expectation that other parts of the third floor will reopen, or there's empty buildings? So what type of communication will go forward with that?
Yeah. And I can't say enough, and my colleagues in community engagement will echo this, or would echo this, is that when we did sessions in Victoria, Old Town always came up. Good discussions, way more productive discussions than sometimes unfolds online. But discussions nonetheless, and some people that were concerned, but by talking through and sort of talking through some of the issues of it, we got to some really good places. But when we're out further from the Lower Mainland and from Vancouver Island, a lot of people are like, Old Town what? There's not, it's different. Like, it's a very different experience that if you grew up in this building than if you know of it and maybe you went once, or you know of it and you access it in different ways. So we really need to honor that. Honoring what it was, but also honoring what needs to change and what can be. Right now, I'm going to switch the camera around. This is where the space will end, and we'll have a little door, right? Oh, and I was going to just show you, we are going to have this feedback display. So this is one of the empty displays, and it will be an area for visitors to give their feedback, both on exhibitions that are currently up or ideas for exhibitions going forward. So this will be an active display area. And then there'll be a door here with a little window to look at the work that's happening behind the scenes. Because we have decanted some of the objects in order to have them safely within the collection. Again, nothing is being given away. It's all part of the collection. And it's actually not a great thing. That's another thing that came up a lot. It's not a good thing for objects to be on display for 50 years, not just because of it's good to revisit narratives within the galleries, but it's not good for the actual objects to be on display for that long as well. So our conservation team here and our pack and move team here are doing incredible work, cleaning and caring for the objects that are in these spaces. And some are going back into our collection and some are staying in the gallery. But the ones that are packed up we need some space for that. So what was the farm over here is used for some storage. Where the cannery was right now is being used for some storage. You'll see around the corner also some storage. There's the water wheel. So it will take some time. What we're doing right now is we're starting with Old Town, opening it up and just sort of starting that process, and then revisiting other areas as we go along. And the First Peoples Gallery in particular is being used as a space for those conversations, those safe conversations with Indigenous community members within those spaces. So that's our direction right now.
And last
but so we don't have a timeline for that. Yeah.
Is it for those councils that you're talking about with the youth one or with the LGBTQ plus or are those how can people get involved in those discussions? Some people were saying that they didn't know about them or didn't hear about them. I did just put in the chat, and it is in the comments on Facebook of the links to the community engagement and also a recording of the last one of them. But how can people get more involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. We just started this. We just brought together, and again, because of the regional partnership program, we're able to bring in folks from many different regions. So we're just starting the process with that advisory. When we get to it's 4-month advisory. We're meeting once a month. Each advisory is meeting once a month. When we get to the end of the summer, we're going to revisit with those folks to see if they want to continue. But then also at that time, maybe we also make a call out to see if anyone else would like to come into those discussions. We want to have this be inclusive and welcoming. We're also at this point with these advisories wanting a safe space for those conversations to unfold.
I think there's a bunch more questions and stuff, but over time.
Yeah, we can officially end, and if anyone wants to stay on, I'm happy to stay on too. So
Sure.
how about we officially end? Thank you so much, everyone, for familiar names I see popping up, and especially for those who have joined in sessions and then have come back just because you're interested in where we've gone since we've last talked. I really appreciate you joining in. And we did a session this morning with staff just talking about this, and we really tried to emphasize that we're all in this together, and we want to all be part of this process together, and that includes everyone here on this call too. So we do have on that engagement website, there is an email that you could reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you further if you have ideas on how to shape this from your own lived experience and from your own expertise. We honor that and would love to hear from you. So